First, revamping the refineries. We do know that the 4 refineries that Nigeria has not really been working over the years. And with the Dangote refinery, there has been hope that, Nigeria would, the amount of petroleum product that Nigeria imports will be reduced. And now there's another hope coming on board now with the revamping of the refineries. What's your take on that?
Well, I'm so elated. Earlier this morning, a friend of mine sent a message to me on WhatsApp from the US asking me what do I think Saudi Arabia is aiming at getting at this conversation. And I just said, this is simple diplomacy. And I think this is the blessings that we'll have as a country, having a president who knows how to sell his country to others. If you had watched the presentation of Mr. President to Saudi authorities at this Riyadh summit, he emphasized that Nigeria is open for business and that there are a whole lot of perception about Nigeria, and that the reason why they were in Saudi was to ensure that they have to personally talk to Saudi that those perceptions are changed already, and that Nigeria is open and we're ready to do business with the world, that all the bottlenecks that makes government ineffective are being reduced. And of course, the government is also working to ensure that corruption is zero. And then I said to all businessmen that don't give anybody a bribe and don't accept bribe from anybody. Talk to me. You see, that was quite reassuring from the part of the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. And so we see this deal coming. You see, because the truth of the matter is that if you look at what Saudi Aramco has done in the last few years, they've made really great stride as a national oil company, just like our own NNPC. In 2022 alone, Saudi Aramco made a profit of $166 billion US. That's a whole lot of money. A whole lot of money. And so the Saudi authorities are promising Nigeria that, look, well, we have the technology. Of course, we also have the resource. And we will do our best to see how to assist you with what we have, at least for that mutual benefit. Don't forget that Nigeria has been always the friend of Saudi Arabia in terms of international relations and diplomacy. So we're a very good friend of Saudi, and therefore, this friendship is what is being elevated into some of this critical investment. And we're waiting to see in the days and the weeks to come how this actually will translate into making those refineries work. And I really would have loved that we'll be thinking about building new refinery or even allowing Saudi Aramco to actually have their own investment. It would be just nice if, of course, they can take over some of this refinery to actually manage it and generate and produce petroleum product for Nigerians. And that will also go a long way in helping the macroeconomic environment of Nigeria to actually stabilize. But for me, I think it's a great win for Nigeria that we're saying that this oil giant that's almost made over 56 billion between February and August is having to say, let me come spend some money in your place, and even promising to help with FX.
Yes, and we'll get to that part, but does it worry you that Saudi Aramco is the one to revamp Nigeria's refineries? Of course, it's an investment. What would be in it for them? Is it wise to allow another country take over, so to speak, Nigeria's refineries?
No, I don't think that that's what it is. What it is that, of course, we're putting the money is an investment. And I think this is happening in a lot of Middle Eastern countries, whether it's Qatar or whether it's in the UAE or Bahrain. You see, because they have been able to actually manage their economy and grow infrastructure within their space very well. So they're having so much money
to spend.
They're having so much money, which, of course, being prudent, you don't want to leave those money just idling down in your bank or keeping them in reserve. You can actually use it to generate more revenue by actually internationalizing those funds. And I think that is what is happening. So I don't think it's a free meal that's been promised. And I think it's an investment opportunity where Saudi is willing to invest in Nigeria, and then, of course, we'll be able to take a return out of this. And I think these are the things that we must have to embrace, because even then in Saudi, or you look at United Arab Emirates also, most of the things that are happening in there are actually done by other people. Take, for example, if you look at the vertical farm in the UAE, for example, it was built by the Qatar government. So these are the kind of investment you're looking at, that, of course, you collaborate with other nations that have some resource, and then, of course, you have this FDI flow in. And you know that our president said that he doesn't want to borrow money so much to drive development. And so he wants to rely on partners who will be able to bring in their money, invest in the economy. And what he's saying is that, yes, we will be able to delay our gratification, allow these people to run the business, they give us some royalty, and then in the future we can own the whole infrastructure. So this is the arrangement I think that the president is working on, and I don't think he's selling us out wholesale.
Okay, in that aspect, choosing to attract investors rather than borrowing, I think it's a very wise one. It saves you the problem of having to service debt. The investments will create lots of jobs as well, and boost the economy. But before we leave the oil sector, which Saudi Aramco is investing in, what are the lessons that our own NNPCL can learn from Saudi Aramco? NNPC, before the reformation kind of was done, was just like Saudi Aramco, state-owned oil company, but it wasn't generating revenue. It wasn't declaring as much profit as Saudi Aramco has done. And over the years, Saudi Aramco has been very, very stable. It has become like a world model of what a state oil company should be. What are the lessons to learn from that? Yeah,
I think there's huge lessons that we can learn. I think it was a Thursday while we were speculating about that meeting that the president was going to have between the Saudi authorities and then, of course, the Arab authorities on the other hand. We actually was saying that even if there's no investment that's going to come, even going to Saudi alone and sitting down with the management of Aramco and say how they were able to actually drive a state-owned enterprise to profitability. Because the argument has always been here that, look, you know, government has no business doing business. And therefore, because government has no business doing business, the chances are that if you have a state-run enterprise, the chances that they are not going to make profit is always high. And this has been the conversation over time. But you see, what we have seen in the Arab world, especially in the Middle East, is that we have seen state enterprises that are run like businesses. And I think this is a very fundamental lesson that we must have to take out. It's not that we don't have the human capital, really, who are able to drive some of all these things. But I think the bigger problem we have as a nation, really, is to see how we can really play down on sentiment so that we don't drive mediocrity to the rooftop at the expense of merit. So this is a problem we have. If you have the right peg, in the right hole, also deploying the appropriate and the right technology that will make revenue leakages not to happen, then of course we can do a whole lot. But again, one of the problems we also find in our environment is the emotional blackmail that you see that most of the time people see government, especially when there's a contestation for power, and you're saying that, oh, you use the situation on the ground to try to blackmail the government into doing things that are unwholesome. So this is also a problem. So what we always emphasize in this part of the globe, everybody speaks about poverty, poverty, poverty. And therefore government is carrying too much of burden, in my own thinking, that is actually making it not profitable. And this is why some people are asking, if government says, for example, that subsidy is not in oil, and government is not supposed to be paying subsidy in oil. And NNPC is still trying to drive down the price of petrol. To that extent, you cannot make profit. Now, when you go to the Arab world, whether it's in the UAE or whether it's in the Saudi Arabia itself, the price of gasoline changes every month. And that is related to the exchange rate of their currency to the dollar. Now, what we are having is that we are selling petrol today in some filling station, $5.95, in some places $600, depending on where you're buying. And this price came some months back. And when of course, the Forex was still exchanging at official rate of 780. But today, you see that the official rate has moved to 820. Now, the question is, who's paying the difference?
Why hasn't the price changed?
Yes, the petrol changed. Why is it stable? So which means, and this is why you hear that some people are still saying, is like government is still paying subsidy. Now, as long as you continue to do that, you cannot make profit. So this is what it is. So we have to run it like a business. And I have emphasized, and I think that the president also made this remark why the national population was launching their site the other day, that we need data to be able to plan. So that even if government is going to incentivize the poor, and this thing should be able to be given to people directly, rather than getting the rich getting richer by feeding on government in the name of the poor.
Okay, so let's move on now to the part where the Saudi government is also providing a substantial deposit of foreign exchange to boost Nigeria's forex liquidity and support ongoing reforms of the central banks. Forex has been a big trouble in Nigeria. And
I think they are all connected.
Yes.
I think they are all connected. It's just that we're trying to break them down into pieces and a bit of news.
It's
just to see.
Or looking at the areas they invested in.
Yes, what the intervention is going to actually do.
Yes.
Because if you say to us you're going to help us revamp our refinery, which means, of course, you are also helping us to bring in actually cash liquidity into the environment for investment. So if they give us some volume of dollars, for example, they have it in
the refineries.
Yes, of course they have. So that comes to us, and then of course it helps our liquidity at the bank. So I think they are connected in some way. The only aspect that seems to be different from this is the area of renewable energy. Where, of course, again, the Saudi Arabia authority, in the last 3 or 4, 5 or 6 years now, actually had a perfected plan to build a new city, the Neon City, which is going to drive principally on complete renewable energy. All the lifts, all the transportation, everything is going to be based on renewable energy, and that project is going to cost Saudi Arabia about $500 billion US, and is expected to be completed by 2030. So they have also made a whole lot of expertise in that place, and there's so much investment going into the Leon City, and this also can also spill over to Nigeria, especially when we have weather that are somehow related. When you look at the northern part of Nigeria and see the Saudi Arabia, you see there's a kind of a correlation depending based on the ecology of our place. So if this happens in Saudi, it can happen in Nigeria. So I think it's all lesson that we can learn, that we can actually see how to diversify the economy. Now, if you look at Saudi Arabia, for example, yes, they are oil rich. They're making so much money from oil, like unlike what we're doing, because they are doing really, we are talking about 1.7 million barrels. They are talking about 30 million barrels per day in terms of oil. So there's a whole lot of money coming out of Saudi Arabia from oil. But today, you see the Crown Prince had deliberately said that Saudi is moving away from just an oil-driven economy. So they are diversifying.
And one of
Oh, yeah. One of the areas that Saudi actually has taken, because they also know that football is driving so much. They don't play too much football in Saudi Arabia, but now they are trying to buy very critical players to come to play football in Saudi. And of course, the window is also open for them now to host the World Cup in 2034. And so all these things are just to see how to bring in foreigners into Saudi, that people are not just coming to visit Saudi for religious purpose alone, but now they are visiting to see the beauty of the city. And I think this is a lesson that we have to learn, not just NNPCL, but the whole of Nigeria need to learn. The public service need to learn this lesson, that it is possible to run corporations by government profitably. And all that is required is our patriotism. All that is required is our competence and compassion for those who are very poor.
And I would like to end that by saying it's like running a country like a business. Because
yes.
when you've made enough money from one aspect, you're looking for other areas to invest in. It's a very wise way.
You see, because what that really means is that if the country makes so much money, then of course you will be able to invest in critical infrastructure. And then, of course, you can take away people from poverty and actually also be able to pay living wages to those who are working. The public service is benefiting, the private sector is benefiting, then prosperity is there. And that is what the president has been selling, what he call about the principle of the shared prosperity, that everybody is living well and we're having access to the basic necessity of life.
Let's hope that the partnership with Saudi Arabia will bring lots of gains for Nigeria. Moving on to another story, the Surveyor General of the Federation, Abdulganir Adeyemi, has emphasized the importance of developing a national geospatial data infrastructure, NDI, in Nigeria. So he added that many countries rely on their own national geospatial data infrastructure for accurate and real-time information about their surroundings, rather than relying on platforms like Google. That's the thing. We talk about security all the time. We talk about having local data, having information about our surroundings. And a lot of times when people drive, they're going to a particular area. It could be that they visited that area for maybe it's been long they visited there and they're using Google Maps. So sometimes it happens that those roads are no longer usable, but the map still has it like that. And so they go that route, only to find out that, oh, it's a dead end and then they have to turn. But having our own, and just using that as an example, having our own national geospatial data infrastructure, that's going to help. What areas are going to benefit from that?
I think like I said in the opening, the president already alluded to that while he was commissioning the bed debt registration portal the other day. I think that was on Wednesday last week. The importance of his geodata is critical for us. It's not just for travels alone. Even our ability to even know what we have beneath the soil. What we have beneath the soil. And most of this data, we don't actually own them, because most of the things we are saying is what some other people's satellite has been able to say to us, that, oh, this place is blessed with this place is blessed with this. It's going to help in a great deal. Of course, you can have actually area surveillance of the entire place. Even like we spend so much money trying to do the enumeration of household and the rest of it, that can actually be done on that platform. And I think that is actually what we need. So that even if there is a problem, you see, whether it's earthquake, whether it's what they call it now, flooding, whether it is desertification, sand pooling, all these things, it can be seen real time.
Clear pictures.
Clear pictures.
So it even aids spreading relief to such areas.
Oh yes, you actually know who you are dealing with, and you can actually also estimate the degree of damage that has been done. And then it helps government to plan adequately and deploy resources to solve a real-time problem.
Good development. So let's move now to another story where the Delta State government has provided training to some operators of orphanages and creches on best practices for infant and young child feeding. You agree with me that this is a very good development, because we live in a time where parents are very busy, for those who have their children in creches, and sometimes there are stories, very sad stories coming from the activities of such places, how they run. And even for orphanages, yes, so a lot of times it's voluntary. It's people just wanting to care for those without parents, but they still need some training.
Yeah, but I think it's important to follow best practice, especially when it comes to the issue of children and managing them. Yeah, a whole lot of people who are volunteered to do orphanage are really, and this is coming out of volunteer, but standardizing that industry is also very important. You see, because a whole lot has also happened in the recent past, where you actually see people who are claiming to be orphanages, and actually what they are doing are children trafficking. So all these things are things that government really need to see how to monitor. That, yeah, these children, by no fault of theirs, may not have parents who own up for them, and then of course people pick them up somewhere and they put them in the orphanages, that they are not commodities to be sold. And then of course they also have the right to be treated well and fed well, because eventually if you don't actually take good care of these people, you know eventually they're also coming back to the society. And then, of course, the kind of attitude or character they pick up from the orphanage will later on in life rub off on the society. So the need to standardize that industry, for me, is also very critical. I think it's a good move from Delta State government, and I think it's something that we can actually spread across the nation, where, of course, these facilities are valuable, to also see what standard, what quality that people have really on ground to be able to run this kind of enterprise. That if you are going to bring children into a home, there must be opportunity and availability for them to be able to play around. We must also be careful the kind of food that they are given to eat, so that, of course, you don't increase the burden in terms of health care or otherwise for the state.
But that may be very possible with creches, because they are private businesses, they run for profit. But for orphanages, they depend solely on donations. So is this actually a thing of some orphanages not knowing how to care for children, or an issue of restricted by the resources that they have? Because after this training now, a lot of them want to go back and implement them, but do they have the resources to bring in what best practices in the care of the children, providing them with emotional care, providing with the financial care, and every other thing that they need to actually grow up well? Because I've seen some orphanages, sometimes they're there until one person comes to, become charitable, donate something, nothing comes in, no actual funding.
Yeah, but I agree with you. It's also to say that if you want to start a project, like they say in scripture, sometimes you also need to count your cost and be sure that it's something that you will want to be able to do or sustain. That's one part of it. And also to understand that, yes, you want to do this thing and you're doing it for people, they understand what capacity you can carry with the resource that you have. So that kind of strategic thinking is also important for the operators of these orphanages. So it's not just to keep receiving children. And then, of course, understanding that, yes, fund is not going to come from, but then, of course, you've taken up this role as a volunteer, it's expected that there must be some standards set in place. So we just don't do it the way we feel. And then, of course, at the end of the day, we are raising children that may not be useful or may have to cope with health challenges as they grow because of what they eat.
Okay, so let's move on to the UK, moving outside of Nigeria now, where UK ministers are planning to cut business taxes in an effort to boost the economy and encourage growth. Cutting taxes. for businesses? I know at this point in time, a lot of Nigerian business people will say, can it get to us? I know at one point in time, President Bola Tinubu actually signed executive orders to suspend certain taxes. But this is happening in the UK, where business taxes are being cut to boost the economy and encourage growth.
Yeah, I think if you've been following development and the politics of the United Kingdom in recent time, you see that they've been in quite financial crisis. And this is because globally the economy is actually not doing well. And there's a whole lot of factors responsible for that. And then, of course, if you therefore will need to be able to meet your obligations, you don't allow your company to die off. Because it's not just individuals that are facing the harsh reality of the global economic space. Even companies are facing it. So the cost of energy for companies is increasing. Cost of compensation is increasing for companies. And so profitability for companies is also decreasing. And if companies are not making profit, and then of course they have no reason to be in business. And if companies are not in business, therefore, you also create social problem in society, which is unemployment. Now, you see all these things are all working together. So, just like they say here, you allow the poor to breathe. UK must also allow the companies to breathe, because it's important. Because only when the companies are making profit, really, that you will be able to deal with the social issues in society. And of course, don't forget that taxes also come from corporations, which of course government run by. And if these taxes are not coming, then government cannot function. But I think it's really a big problem, big time problem globally, especially for UK, with not so much resources needing to cope with the challenge of sustaining the standard of living that they have created for their citizens so far.
First of all, as an individual, how do you come to that decision to know which skill to learn or to acquire? What skill to upskill, and how do you go about it? What should inform such decision for a person?
Well, I think is the market.
Okay.
Really, you see, you have a skill. It's not for yourself. It's to serve an audience. What determines that is that people look at what is happening in your environment. You look at your space. What is changing? What new technology are available? What are the new ways of doing things? And so you're going to learn based on the environmental scanning, or where the trend is moving toward. So that helps you to determine, and say, oh, people are having a need for this kind of service, and therefore I need either to upskill or I need to develop a new skill so that I will be able to fit into this environment. You see, before now, technology changes maybe every 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. But as we speak, technology are evolving biannually, some is even monthly. And you see, there are new things that are happening. And of course, if you must cope in this world that is changing, management experts use the word vocal to explain or categorize what is going on in our space today. There's a whole lot of volatility taking place. There's so much uncertainty in the environment, complexity and ambiguity of so many things. So this vocal environment, like somebody says, also will need a vocal approach. In other words, people must have a very clear vision where the world is going and where they have to be tomorrow. And then, of course, people must also have a clear understanding of things, the way things are. So seek a lot of clarity. And then, of course, the ability to also change very quickly, which, of course, is driving so many corporations today. Agility is also important for individuals. So when you take this vocal approach to your environment, understanding that, look, you need a clear vision to say, this is where I want to be. So you must also be learning new skills around those environments. Take, for example, we're talking about CNG cars today. So which means technology is shifting. So it's not going to be the normal mechanic work. So you must have to develop skill set to be able to meet this emerging market. So it's shifting completely. And this is where we need to enlighten and educate people to look at the trend globally. You know, I was speaking somewhere recently and I said to them, even when we're talking about that there's no employment in Nigeria, you see, there are companies that have advertised positions in the last 2 years, and they don't have competent hands to actually fill it. So while we're crying that there's not so much employment, you're seeing there's a space that are opened up. Because of technology, people are not able to fill in those spaces. And this is the challenge that we face as a people, because people are used to the old way of doing things. Remember those era of typewriter? So you just do typewriter, and then things move on. Now, all of a sudden, computer came in, and some people feel, oh, Lou, forget that thing. This typewriter can't fade away. But I don't think that you see typewriter today, except you go to maybe court where they are typing affidavit. So this is the real problem, and this is what people faces. So you're not seeing the trend that things are changing. We are moving from the third industrial revolution to the fourth industrial revolution, and some people are already moving into the fifth industrial revolution. So the way work is done is changing completely. Today, when people are asking you to see things you can do from home, a lot of people are doing multiple jobs right there on their system, and they're doing it all from home, and they're delivering value. So this is where it is important for us as a people to begin to really see how we can open our heart and our mind to the changes that is happening in the world. It may not start with us, but as long as it's starting somewhere, we must put our heart into it and see how we can transition from what we currently do to the new ways of doing things.
Okay, for the purpose of this segment, let's look at apprenticeship and on-the-job training. You've talked about skill, that it's the market that should determine what skill a person should learn. There are different ways people upgrade these days. People can learn skills, acquire skills online. There are different online tutors and platforms where they can upskill. But for those who do acquire skills physically, they're either apprentice, depending on where they're acquiring the skill, or they're interns, as they're called in the corporate world. Looking at our apprenticeship system, what seems to be the challenge? Does it look like it's structured in a way that delivers effectively skill to people?
Yeah, well, I think so. We must see it beyond even apprenticeship, because I also teach supply chain sometimes. One of the key topics we talk about in supply chain is value engineering. Where, of course, if you're going to purchase something from a manufacturer, original manufacturer, you should be able to enter into an agreement or a contract with that company to train the hands within you to be able to handle and maintain those equipments. That's a form of skill acquisition. So you're not just buying, for example, the cameras alone. You're also saying to the manufacturer of camera, Blackmagic, yes, we bought your camera, but we don't have the capacity to run it or maintain it. We want you to do a training for us. Those who are going to handle the camera, that they should be able to handle it. And apart from handling it, they should be able to do the minimum maintenance that the camera requires to be in operation. So you are not just buying the camera, you're also buying with it some measure of services. Now, this also is a kind of skill acquisition that people can get. That, of course, once the technology comes, because you're not the owner of technology, the person is bringing technology for you to develop. But you see, talking about apprenticeship is you're learning under somebody. And I think that is as old as humanity, and that's the only way to learn. That people who are successful and have been able to demonstrate competence and capacity in a certain area, then you are going to come under them, understudy them, so that you can do exactly what they are doing. Recently, I was having a conversation with one of the directors in Aseni, and I said that one thing that, of course, the federal government has also done, the National Agency for Science and Technology, that You see, you need to be able to actually get to that point where people who work are certified. And I was actually advocating and seeing where we can actually make regulations that people don't just get into skill without certification. Now, if you grew up in the early 70s, in the 60s, in the early 80s, you have what they call the City and Guide, which was just to certify people to even be common mason or bricklayers or mechanics, that you go through a process that actually standardizes this, and then of course you are certified and you have a City and Guide certificate which makes you like an engineer and you're able to service. So this will help maintain quality of service across board. And that's why you see in other countries where this is done and done very well, they can produce and reproduce people who do things well. Just take, for example, POP fixing. You have plenty of people who come from Togo, and they are able to do it better than all of us. And the real reason is because they are structured in such a way that you have to pass through a process to transfer this technology to you. And then you are given standard that will lead to your certification. And this is important. Even vulcanizing, managing tires, and all these things. These are small skills that are in society. But what you see is that people just go and you can't certify them. And so you give them your electronics to fix and they damage it because they have actually not learned the process. So I think this is important, and this is quite really important. A lot of people don't even want to go through the process. And so they just want to get into freedom without having to learn the real rudiments of the work. So this is where structured apprenticeship is important. That even the person who is going to offer the service, there should be an institution that is also overseeing and accrediting these agencies to see that they are delivering value. Now, if you learn driving, for example, in Ghana, you can go to UK and drive without anybody taking you through any driving tests. If you're in Kenya and you drive in Kenya, you can drive in Europe without necessarily have to go through any driving test. But if you are in Nigeria, you can't drive in the UK. You have to go to driving school in Europe.
What was the difference between the countries?
That is the point that I'm making. Because when you see the way the driving school in Ghana is structured, it's like a school. Nobody can just jump on a car and drive. Here in Lagos, for example, if you are a motor boy with somebody and you have spent 2 weeks, you have somebody move motor back and move it forward, then the next day you give you vehicle and you start to drive. That can happen in Ghana. So it's standardized, it's structured. And so this is the real thing that we need to do. Because number one, you will understand. I remember when I was learning to drive, the Ghanaian who taught me and he said to me, this is the road. Now, I want you to think. You have somebody in your front, you have somebody in your back, you have somebody on your side. So there are about 5 of you on this lane of the road now. Assume that. And everybody around you, they are all mad people. You are the only one with common sense. So you have to drive for everybody. Just understand that the person in front of you doesn't have sense. The one in your back does not have sense. The one by your side does not have sense. The one on the other side, the only person who has sense is you. So it was an assumption, and has helped me even in driving. And this is because this thing was taught to them in the driving school. So all these things we really need to structure. Because if we also have, for example, good people who drive, for example, can go into the UAE, for example, and they give you permit to drive. If you are from India or Pakistan, because they also recruit drivers from outside to go drive. And they say, okay, they have plenty of buses and today, or the RT vehicles, and they are bringing in drivers from Pakistan, they are bringing in drivers from India. Now, if you say you are a certified driver from Nigeria, nobody's going to take you. So we need to structure that process that whatever skill that one need to get, whether it's driving skill, whether it's photography, whether it is vulcanizing, whether it is even carpentry, there must be a standardization, a structure that people go through. And by the time they finish, we know that these people are not just guessing to do their work, but they have learned some processes to make these things work for them.
All right. With this narrative, because you're giving us the reality now, which is what is in vogue now, do you think there's a need to have a kind of system where you merge vocational training with the conventional, educational training, whereby, the academic curriculum is being changed to give room for skill acquisition, vocational. Unlike the past where you have people, the narrative is go to school, get certification, and then you acquire skills by the side. But do you think now it should be like a full-time thing incorporated into the academic curriculum?
Well, I've also spoken to this as well about the kind of revolution that have come into the Nigerian education space in 1986. When the late Professor Bafafuwal took over as Minister of Education in Nigeria, and he introduced the German education system, which is the 634 system. What that system was supposed to do for us as a nation was to ensure that people's skills are aggregated at very elementary phase in the secondary school. And by the time they have got into GSS 3, these people would have been able to acquire some skills that will enable them in case they don't want to go further in education. And they just stop at that level, and they have been able to acquire some measure of skills, whatever kind of skill, and then that can fill them for the rest of their life. And of course, to be fair to General Muhammadu Babangida then, who was the president at that time, he actually invested heavily on equipments to fund this new way of thinking. All the secondary school in Nigeria, as at that time, they had equipment, whether they were carpentry, whether they were tailoring, all these things were brought into the laboratory to actually equip these children to have this critical skill. But there was something that was lacking. And what was that? Those equipment were in those secondary schools, and they didn't have people who even have the requisite knowledge to be able to teach these things. So that's what had really hampered the development of those skills at that early stage in life. Because children learn, the younger you are, the quicker and the more ability you have to actually learn or acquire a skill. But this didn't happen because we didn't have people who were actually qualified enough to teach these things. And I think this is a real gap that we have in our educational system. Because whether you like it or not, if you have a child in secondary school today, especially those who are writing senior secondary school examination, you find that the school has already designed it in such a way in Nigeria that if you are, whether in science or you are in art, you have the privilege to take a vocational subject, and you are even entitled to write it in the exams. So you see some people do data processing. Some people do poultry. Some people do fishery. Some people do all manners of things. And they're all subjects as are listed today on the curriculum of the secondary school. But the question to ask is, to what extent are we delivering on this value? You have a child score A1 in data processing, and you ask which data? He doesn't know SPSS. He doesn't know basic research method. But yet you give him an A1 in data processing, and he cannot process any data. Because when you look at what is taught, for example, because do a course in computer science or computer studies, the same curriculum they are teaching them in computer studies, the same curriculum they are teaching them in data processing, which looks to me really somehow very stupid. And this is because the person who is teaching data processing himself cannot process data.
So if the trainer doesn't have the requisite knowledge,
yeah, the
it
competence
can't even
and the
pass.
capacity to deliver the value, yes, you may have the curriculum in place, then you will not be able to actually deliver on that. This is where the problems really lies. That we need a functional educational system where, for example, you are having competent people as teachers who really have a hands-on, experience on some of all these things. I came back from Kigali the other day, and one of the places we visited in Kigali was where they call the Kigali Innovation Center, where you have the fusion of the knowledge lab and the fabrication lab. So the fab lab and the knowledge lab is on the same scale. So what they do there is that you have your children who are thinking and they are creating designs, and then they finish creating the design here, then there is a factory there where machines are there to bring to life the things that they have learned. And I was saying to some of our people who were there with me, look at it, how simple this structure is. Very simple. The building is not fantastic. The equipments are not anything that is sophisticated. And I was asking myself, why is it difficult for us as a people to actually see how we can do things and create this kind of mindset where children can become very creative? What they have done is that all the designs you see in hotel in Rwanda is produced actually, whether they are artwork, they are produced in the fabrication lab. And this is the kind of approach to education that we need to take as a people. So that when people come to school, children are in school, we are teaching them computer science, and we spend 4 years or 3 years, SS1, SS2, SS3, to teach them computer science, and they really cannot write a program. So this is a problem. You have an A1 in computer science, but what do you really know about computer? Just basic terminology about computer. How does that give you an A1? So this is where we need to revisit our curriculum in schools, so that when children read, for example, chemistry, they should be able to see that, look, as a chemist, you can actually produce salt. You can actually produce soap. You can actually produce perfume. You can actually produce pomade. These are basic. You don't even need to be in university to be able to do this. It's just to see that the chemistry teacher should be able at the practical lab to teach the children what elements to bring together to be able to form these little things. And these children can go ahead and begin to be thinking and see how to commercialize and put these things to life. To really know what is nitrogen, how does it function, what work should it do. So we give them all the chemical names and elements, but then of course they don't know how to combine it. And they go through the system, they have A1 in chemistry, A1 in physics, and of course it's actually translating into nothing, not to even talk about at the university level. So this is the real problem we have, and I think we need functional education where our system is able to educate our children and give them the opportunity to think.
Let me point your attention to the state of technical schools in Nigeria. Ideally, technical schools should handle the issue of vocational training, skill acquisition. That's the ideal thing, or the essence of creating those technical schools. But would you say that those schools, they've lived up to expectation? What is the missing link here?
Well, I think at the time when the technical education was created, they were actually living up to their billing. I know of a young man around me, not a young man now, he's now a full-grown man, who actually went to technical college, and he can fix generator, he can repair fridge and all of that. They were all learned in school. It was not something that they acquired elsewhere. But like I said, when the 63-4 educational system came, it was actually to make all secondary education technical to an extent. So that's what has happened. But the extent to which that actually happened is another ball game altogether. You see, the real problem we have, as far as I'm concerned, and I think is the greed and the avarice of public servants who really don't prioritize the development of the nation, as it were. And this is why we're always talking about funding, funding, funding. You see, some of all these things don't really require so much. They don't require so much. All that is just required is a determined system that's working. And when you have that desired system that is working, everything will flow. And then government just creates some policy measure alongside it to actually bring and drive the process. If you remember, when Fashola was the governor of Lagos State, for example, he revamped the technical education in Lagos. I know the one in Agidingbi. I know some set of boys who went through that process. Those of them who did electrical engineering in the technical colleges, Fashola actually empowered them to be the people who maintain all the street lights in Lagos. That was a huge incentive. Whether that is still on now, I don't know. But I know that when Fashola was the governor in Lagos State, he was able to actually do this. And I knew young people who actually studied electrical in those colleges who were actually able to wire a full house. So this is where it is. And I think it's the willpower of the public officers or those who run education system to actually invest in some of these children, invest in some of the critical tools that are required. Take, for example, carpentry. That doesn't take so much. It doesn't require so much investment. A carpentry workshop, the maximum you will spend there will not be more than 1 million, for example, for a school, where the children can learn how to make chairs and then really make good chairs. So, but this is what is lacking.
You talked about the schools, with the subjects that students are taught. Chemistry, for instance, they should be able to do practical things that they don't necessarily have to leave school and begin to try to acquire that kind of skill again. But let me take you back to something we talked about earlier when we started the discussion, standardizing apprenticeship in a way that everyone who goes through a particular kind of training, for instance, either maybe you're a mechanic, for instance, it's standardized, and there's a body that certifies those people. It works in other countries, but in a place like Nigeria, from what we've seen, for some of these skills, there are certificates. They are certified. But it seems like what the body does is just to give a certificate, or the individual trainer issues a certificate on behalf of the association, but we do not actually have a body. Who's to constitute that body? Is it the government, or the government in partnership with the artisans who are training those people? For instance, let's say hairdressing. It could even be tailors. How do we standardize that it is actually a thing that when you're standardizing, you're not just giving paper to certify that, oh, you've gone through this training, but there are tests to ensure that you actually have learned something?
Well, I think it's, for me, completely a big problem. Yesterday, I was having a conversation with some people in church, and because in a country like ours, where we have to blame government for everything that's not working, sometimes I really get some headache trying to wrap my head around why people feel that government must be people who do a whole lot of things. And that's why I keep saying that the problem with Nigeria is the human people in Nigerians who will not do what is right. And I think that's the real tragedy we have. You have people who, for example, have the responsibility to certify that something is done well, and all they do is seek rent and then just allow the process to go. So that's where we have a terrible challenge. Take, for example, in our high institutions of learning, you have a professor who is supervising a student. And this student is supposed to build a model as his project before he graduates. Now, it's a responsibility of the professor to really follow through, that this chap knows exactly what he's doing. Look at, for example, we have a lot of polytechnics in Nigeria where student goes on sideways, for example. Now, these students are supposed to be posted to companies where they can actually match their theory with practice. Now, all that school does is that they just give an open letter to children and say, go and look for a place to do your sideways. Whether it's relevant to their course or training is immaterial. And for parents or for the student or the school, all that sideways has meant now is maybe you just do vacation job for 3 months. So this is the real problem. We've had students who done sideways here. There's actually a body who is responsible to ensure that this is done. They have offices around Lagos. And since we've been here, I've never seen one of their staff come here to see and observe whether the children they send out, they're actually learning or not learning. Now, that's the problem we have. It's massive to that extent that you certify people and you are really not too sure whether they know what they're doing. We had that with driver's license. You don't need to know how to drive. Somebody is an agent, he takes your document, process it. All that you need to do is just to go to the driver license place and do capture. And then they give you driver's license, even when you have not known how to change a car. It's happening in this place. So this is a tragedy. Lack of patriotism on the part of so many Nigerians who have responsibility to see that the country is done well, but they don't do it well. My friend gave me a joke some years ago. A certain man who wanted the son to become a medical doctor at all costs. And he knew that the child has no capacity to actually learn medicine. And of course, he shall pay through the system. And the son eventually was graduated, he became a medical doctor because he had so much money to pay through the system. And then when he was terribly sick, he came to the hospital for a surgery, and when he opened his eyes, he saw that it was his son that was standing there to do operation for him, and he said, please, they should call a better doctor. These are the kind of things that we see in our environment. So we have sponsored people through a process, and by the time it's coming for them to actually act on us, like that man will do, say, look, I need a proper doctor because at least I know this one. So these are the things that are really affecting us. You see, some of the things that we permit and things that we allow, just because we feel that we are benefiting at the immediate, in the longer run could actually become and not doing for the entire process. When you saw the doggedness with which Dora Akulu, of late blessed memory, fought the fake drug incidents in Nigeria, you know, like people had advanced, it was because of how fake drug killed one of the siblings. And so when he had the opportunity at NAFDAC, he knew that, look, anybody could be a victim of fake drug. She fought it with her life. And I think these are the kind of things that we all need to do. That if you certify somebody who is not a good mechanic, he will always spoil your vehicle because you don't know when it's going to come to him in the workshop. So all these things are things that we need to do and do very well. Whether it's at the rudimentary level on the roadside where people are learning, or whether it is at the institutions of learning, even the higher institution. I know of a friend of mine who went to Germany some years ago to go and do electronic engineering, and he told me for 6 months he was stuck in the factory because part of his project was to produce a stopwatch that should be able to measure the heart rate and the body temperature while doing exercise. That was his project. So he had done the design in school, and in 6 months he was taken to a factory to bring that design to life as a condition for graduation. So this is where we are. And you have here people choose a topic, a research topic, and they leave university and say, oh, what was your project topic? They can't even remember it. Can't remember it. Because it's just to fulfill all righteousness. What use do we have people with first class? Or in the secondary school, you have people with straight A's. And 1 year, 2 years after school, they can't even remember the thing they learned in school. What's the use of that A? So this is where we need to look at the people who operate a system and then see how much more we can really deal with our greed so that we can produce something that is right. I had the opportunity some months back to talk to somebody in NUC, and I said, you people pay blind eye to what we see in the universities. That people are moving both personnel and equipment for course accreditation. You say you don't know? That we are accrediting courses in all the university. The university have no capacity to teach those courses, and you accredit them, and you know that these people are moving personnel from one university to another, or equipment from one university to another to be able to secure this accreditation, just to take money from the Nigerian public. And you feel comfortable about it, and you pay blind eye to it, and yet you are the regulator. These are the issues, and this is where we really need to speak to that those who are taking our public money for a living should do the job for which they are employed.
Let's look at this disturbing trend now, where you have the best of artisans are not coming from Nigeria now, from neighboring countries like Ghana, Togo, and in the past, Nigeria used to be at the top of the table, at the top of the ladder. But now you see that, there's a nosedive whereby the best of artisans now are now coming from these countries. What do you think is likely responsible for this, and how do we begin to change the narrative for this to be in a proper shape?
I think it's value reorientation can actually be the solution to some of all these things. You remember Gandhi, 7 social sins. And I think that's where we have found ourselves as a people, where you have intelligence without character, you have commerce without morality, politics without conscience. These are the things that we're talking about. And I think this is the issues that we really need to deal with as a people. Until we're able to actually overcome some of all these things, we will not be able to get out of the kind of situation where we have found ourselves, where people are shoddy. They're shortcut to everything. This is a problem. So if you have shortcut to everything, and people really don't have values, there are no patience, the driving force is always money, money and money, and money for money's sake. There's no passion. Yesterday we were sitting around and we were just imagining. You look at our whole entire space in terms of recruitment, and the difficulty and the hardship to find a worker in Nigeria. People who are committed to work. All that people just simply want is, they want just say, I'm an employee and I come to work, pay me salary at the end of the month, and that's all we want. There's no commitment to the process. There's no dedication. There's not even aspiration to even learn new things to make the job better. Because all our concern is about you move to the next job, whether it's career or no career, it doesn't really concern you. As long as they add another 20,000 to what you currently learn, you just move. As long as we follow that trend, where our value orientation is tailored toward amassing money and not delivering service, this situation we're talking about will not change.
All right, talking about the job, people coming to, or people getting the job and not actually delivering value. There is what is called on-the-job training. Some persons are employed and with the intention that over time they will acquire the skill that they need to do the job on the job. What is the structure, or what should be the approach towards ensuring that? How effective is it even on-the-job training?
You know, I spoke with a young lady yesterday, and he said to me, you see, the current role I feel in my company today, I came into it when my boss, who I learned under, was leaving the company. And this boss, I was doing this job as volunteer. I was going to work every morning without being paid, and I was doing this thing with the whole of my blood and body. And when this guy got a job somewhere to move out, he spoke to the management on her behalf, and he said, this girl has given in everything about herself to do this job, and she was doing it for free. The company was not paying her 1 naira. And I am certified that this person can fill my role. Because in the last 2 years that she has worked here, he was the one actually driving the entire process. And this is one of the things that you also see elsewhere. Look at somebody like Obama. He didn't just become American president one day. He spent a lot on volunteerism, where he actually cultivated the service habit. And then this connected him to people. Look at Lee Kuan Yew, having graduated from Oxford University with a first class in law, didn't go straight into law practice. Converted the energy and the knowledge he acquired from Oxford to serve the downtrodden in Singapore. And then they were able to rally around him and pushed him as a leader of the people, Republic of Singapore. Now, this is what is missing in our environment. The people are not even willing to learn. That is the tragedy. Some people are just not trainable. They are not open in their heart. All they are asking you is, how much? How much? Even learning the job and say, okay, give people assignment to do, they are not willing to do it because their heart, their passion is not in the job. So on-the-job training is not a workshop. It's somebody that you are saying, I give somebody an assignment, do this, do this. If you are writing scripts, you say, okay, write this, and then you give somebody an assignment, he just said, I can't do it. And you see grudge in their face. You see it all over them. Disapproval. Some people don't even want to learn something new. They want to do it the same old way. And you know that's how Albert Einstein defined insanity. You can't be doing the same old thing and expect a different result. So this is a problem. Once you have people with a mindset to learn, with a mindset to be trained, then of course, we will find people who are learning. But we are in an environment where there is no incentive from the society itself for people to learn, really know anything. Because in Nigeria, like they say, you can become anything without knowing nothing. As long as there is somebody who knows somebody that can get you into a place. This is a problem. So why do I need to bother myself Somebody once said to me, I said, there are some, what they call them, the people who carry fire in the office, clerk in the office, that are more powerful than DGs because of who brought them to office. And they can even remove a DG. So you can't talk to them. So how do you teach such person? How do you encourage a student to learn when there is, for example, they call it a miracle center, where all they need to do is their parent put in 250,000 and then you give them straight A's in all the courses. So these societal values, whether from parents, whether from teachers, I know in some places, even in schools, those days, where lecturers were actually collecting contract to duplicate projects for students. All these things are the things that are affecting us. And again, it speaks to our value as a people.
All right. Let me come from this angle, because it's not just good to talk about the problems. Let's also look at the solutions now. What would be your recommendations if you look at the skill gap between the crop of graduates that you have now and the skills needed on the job? The skill gap. How do we address this skill gap? Because I remember one minister, you alluded to the fact that an average Nigerian in Nigeria, or some graduates in Nigeria are not employable because of the skills gap. How do we address this shortfall so that, what are your recommendations on how to address this shortfall where you have graduates meeting up with the skills level required for the labor market?
I think one of my friends recently was advocating that we should stop using professors as vice chancellors for universities, and that we need to look for entrepreneurs, business people, who should run university and run it like a business, just the way it's done elsewhere. And if you have such people who run universities like this, then you can actually build a synergy between corporations and the university system, for example. You see, because that synergy that should exist between the town and the gown is critical. How can you teach somebody accounting without the person really understanding how basic bookkeeping is kept in a company? This is a problem. So what should determine the school curriculum? Is what is happening in society. Now you are teaching one curriculum in the last 20 years without revising it, and you are churning out graduates, and the work environment is changing. This is a challenge. So I read accounting in the university, and I don't know how to operate a SAGE application, for example, which is the basic work tool that every accountant is going to use in the workplace. This is where the problem is. You are doing course on cost accounting. You are doing course in the place. But there are this work tool that this man really needs at the workplace. You need to learn those software, its application, how it's used. This is where the problem lies. The lack of synergy between the town and the gown. So going forward, I think that we should be able to create that synergy to happen, where the corporations determine what kind of skill that they require in the workplace, and that should inform the kind of curriculums that are taught in the schools.
So in that will be the schools be able to supply to the workforce or to the corporations what they need, because that's what the persons there or the students there have been trained. And that way the job training may not even be necessary, because they come in already knowing what to do. It may just be gaining some experience or becoming more strong in what they do.
No, remember some years ago, I was speaking with the corporate communication director, NUC, some years back, and I asked the lady, I see that every day we are giving licenses to new university and all this. What's actually the driving force behind licensing new university? He said, you see, every year, over 1 million Nigerians register for JAM, and the placement opportunities about 66,000, so a lot of people are not accommodated. And I asked her, assuming you were a baker, and you are baking bread for a population of 100 people, will you bake 1 million bread daily? And he was looking at me. And I asked her, as NUC, have you done an assessment of the graduate needs in our environment before you are expanding the space for more entrants to come in? And he said no. And this is a real issue. You see, because we have put so much emphasis on certification as a people, as against competence, it had given us a kind of a thinking that the only way people can make it in life is until they become university graduates, which does not happen elsewhere in the world. So I was, like I said, I was making a reference to the conversation I had with somebody in NUC at the time, and I said to her, why should we license university? And the point she was making was the fact that there's a lot of application, and the university spaces cannot accommodate everybody, and therefore they need to create more university. So we're having so much university without really even paying attention to the industry need for graduates. So that was where I was drawing the analogy of having a population of 1,000 and you are baking a bread for 1 million people without looking the size of your market. So my emphasis was the need to do baseline analysis on what is the industry need. How many graduates do we need as against those who are in polytechnic? I also remember in 2016, I had the opportunity to also train at Auchi Polytechnic, and I was speaking to the rector to ask her really what was the plan for the Polytechnic. And she said to me, what they are leveraging on her is vocational training. And I said, who are the candidate or the student for this vocational training? He said, they are past student. And I asked her, I said, that must be very wicked. Why will you keep somebody on your campus for 4 years, and after 4 years, he come back for 18 months or 6 months for something that will put food on his table? What was he doing in the first place for 4 years in your campus? And he said, it was just for literacy. I said, no. UNESCO definition of literacy is the ability to read and write. And that happened at the primary school, not at the Polytechnic. We don't do literacy at Polytechnic. Literacy happened at the primary school. The ability of a child to read and write. That's what makes him literate. So at the secondary education, at the tertiary education, what you are looking at is developing the competencies that will put food on the table of a man. So if you know a 10-month curriculum is enough to put food on the table of a man, then design your curriculum around that space. But they don't have that power to do that. Of course, NTB had to do that for them. The National Board for Technical Education has to set the curriculum for them to use. This is the real nightmare, and this is where the challenges are. So we need that kind of synergy and interactions between the administrators, the school system itself, and then, of course, the industry. Now, once this triangle are working in harmony, then we'll actually be able to see how we grow a system where you produce graduates that can fit into the employment space. So that's why we're talking about unemployability. If you remember earlier, I mentioned that there are some certain work gap, especially with the Jackpot syndrome, that a lot of people have visited the bank and you are having opportunities lying down low there and people can't feel it. And you are seeing some Nigeria who are actually working out, doing extra job from Canada so that they can fill those bases, because we don't have the skill competencies in home here to fill those gaps. So once you use somebody passing through a system for 4 years, and what you're doing is that you are still trying to train these people. Take, for example, in the automotive industry, Europe has written that by 2050, all gasoline cars have to be phased out in Europe. So what you are going to be having is electric cars. Now they're already using hybrid. How is our mechanical engineering department fitting into this role? Envisaging what's going to happen in 2050. So all these issues are the things that we should be really involved at, and where people are very serious. I was in Kigali, and I asked the guy, and I asked the guy who was a rector in the Polytechnic, how is your school structured? He said there's only one federal university in Kigali. One, University of Kigali, of Rwanda. But they have multiple campuses. You have a college of medicine in one region, college of engineering in another region, college of agriculture in another region, college of business administration in another region. All of them issue one certificate. And once you finish from any of the campuses or college, you get the certificate of the University of Rwanda. In that case, you are able to actually standardize the operations. So you have a university, University of Nigeria, Nsukka, doing something different. You have University of Benin doing something different. You have University of Maiduguri doing something different. And at the end of the day, we can actually not articulate the things that we want. And you see, university siting too is not done in such a way that you have to actually leverage on the natural capacity that people have. And I'm just imagining, for example, that you're having a campus, a broad-based campus of animal husbandry down the northeast or northwest, where people are used to rearing animals. And all that you just need to teach them is the modern way of rearing animals. They're already used to it. They don't need to speak fantastic English to know the technology or the nitty-gritty of that industry. All they just need to know is the fact that this is how we have been doing it before, but there's a better way to do it to get good results. And that's why if you have read this book by Professor Jane Collins, Good to Great, and when he was using the Nicanor example of some companies that were able to actually move out from the realm of goodness to greatness, one of the things that he said in that book was the fact that you can not teach a farmer the attitude to work. And so what the company did was to take their factory to a location where people already possess the attitude to work. Farmers wake up very early in the morning and they want to get to work. Now that one you cannot teach in the university. Culture already provided that. And so once we are able to do things in these directions, where we are having training fit the needs on the environment, it will become more functional, it will become more productive.
All right. We seem to be focusing on those who are literates, the graduates, but I also want us to tailor our discussion towards looking at the plight of those who are illiterates, who are not educated. What kind of intervention do you think can be put in place by the government to cater for the needs of people who are not educated, who are illiterates, for them to be able to acquire some skills so that it can bring a level of development to the society?
I think it should actually be, how am I going to put it?
Like a national policy?
A haram, abomination, to even be talking about people who are not literate in our environment.
But they are in existence.
Yes, I agree with you. I agree with you. The point I'm making is that I think government needs to be more serious, really, to begin to criminalize parents who refuse to send their children to school. Because at that level, at the primary level, it's almost free. Lagos, for example, run a free education from primary up to WAEC. What is the business of having an out-of-school child in Lagos? That should be a criminal offense. You see, because there are some certain things that we don't need to joke with. The ability of people to be able to think. And when you are still talking in Lagos today, where school is free, books are provided, tuitions are not paid, and then you are having a child who says the child is out of school, the parent should be made to pay for it, for that irresponsibility. So this for me is what really we should really focus our heart on. Yeah, but for those who are already adult and are not trained, yes, society also have created these vocational spaces where people can learn new skills. And that's why I'm saying that there should be a national policy that had to be designed, in short, as a matter of fact, since we have NASENI already in place, whose role is actually to help develop skills around technical issues, engineering area, and science, then, of course, you can actually empower them to oversee this dimension of vocational studies so that it can have an appropriate structure in place or systems where people can go through and acquire skills that will be relevant to the need of the society.
Talking about acquiring skills relevant to the society or even to the labor force, there are times government comes up with initiatives to train youths and even to empower women. Sometimes they seem to be skewed to a particular direction, and it's a wonder, like, how are this designed? How it doesn't seem to have the future in its plan. For instance, youths have been trained on certain skills, maybe agriculture, and the new methods of agriculture are not incorporated into such training. Women have been trained on certain skills. It's like, as of old, it's either hairdressing, it's either makeup, it's either maybe catering, things like that. So our empowerment initiatives, what is the way to go with that from the government level?
Yeah, I think government is doing its bit. Anything done at government level most of the time is political, and you have a lot of political consideration and undertones around it, and at the end of the day, it may not really deliver value. But it's also to realize, too, that there are also some corporate agencies and establishments. Some time ago, I saw a kind of vocational training program or project that was initiated by the German embassy and an NGO in Lagos here, where actually they were doing a whole lot of, like, 3 months of training for widows and women. What they were actually doing, those I saw, and I think this one I had the practical experience of, was that these certain women were trained, for example, on catering. What they do is that they train them, they bring the equipment to site for catering, they do practical catering on Fridays, they do the classes, then they come to do the baking. Now, at graduation, they give them an oven, give them a gas cooker, and some basic equipment that they will need for training. And the center I saw, they did it like for 6 months, and people were coming to the center to learn all various of skills, including hairdressing and all of this. Now, this is a private initiative that also is empowering individuals to be able to do some work. State is also doing some. I also know that in Lagos State, for example, in the area of agriculture, the Ministry of Agric also is doing a whole lot of empowerment for young people and those, of course, who need new skill in the area of agriculture. But I heard one story sometime, but how true this is, I don't know really, where a certain woman was telling me that those who were trained, and they actually gave them seedlings for planting. They gave some maize, they gave some granite for planting, and then those who received it eventually went to sell it to people who are frying granite and making popcorn. You see, this is an issue. So government is intending something and say, okay, let me train you and then empower you. Don't let me not give you money. I give you seedling to go and plant, and then somebody convert it to cash.
So what is the issue in that case? Is it about poverty or people not being serious with what they do?
I think it's the poverty mindset. The poverty mindset is a problem. So people are so much concerned about today without necessarily looking at tomorrow. So we are concerned about what we are going to eat today. Again, that reminds me of the book written by Mesa Otabi, By the Future. And he says in that book that many of African way of thinking is what he called the Esau mindset of eating everything today without thinking about tomorrow. And he said that the mindset that actually brings about development and transformation of society is the Jacob mindset, which is the mindset that invests, the mindset that cultivates. And you remember that story of Esau and Joseph and the Jacob in the Bible, where, of course, when Isaac was about to die, he had asked Esau to go and get an animal from the bush, which was his forte, to make that delicious meal that he loves to eat. And then he had to run to the bush to go look for an animal. And unfortunately, a Jacob who don't need to go to the bush, has several goats at the backyard, just went into the backyard, bring out one, and then before he came back to get his own, they have prepared the same meal and the father has eaten. And the blessing was given to Jacob instead of Esau. You know, when we look at that scripture in the Bible, so was it ethical or not ethical, it's a different ballgame. But just imagine that Esau had the ability to think about cultivating, you know, those animals that he was killing. He just killed like every hunter. They kill the hunter. All that is, you run after an animal, kill the animal, eat it for the same day, and that's all. Against Esau, who will have to nurture the animal to produce, Jacob will have to nurture the animal to produce many more animals. And then you can actually take one of the animal and then slaughter to eat. You see, but that's the assignment that God gave to man, really, especially if you read it from the point of the Quran or the Holy Scripture of the Bible, where the Bible says, replenish the earth. So we just don't need to kill all the animal and eat. And that's why you see, if you come to our villages now, a lot of animals are extinct. Why? Because we just, as hunters, kill them and eat. We don't cultivate them. We don't domesticate them. So this is the problem with a lot of us. We have the Esau mindset. Just kill and eat. And we're not thinking about savings. We don't think about investment. We don't think about tomorrow, that we need to eat today, but we also need to survive tomorrow.
The teachings people receive from videos online, is it enough to give a person all the knowledge, all that they need for a certain skill? Or is it skill dependent? It depends on the kind of skill you're acquiring.
Well, like I said from the very beginning, when you look at our environment and the way we do things, you know, I belong to an Orthodox church. We used to say, as it was in the beginning, so it shall be now and forevermore. Nothing changes. But of course, we all know that life is so dynamic that the only constant thing in life is change itself. Everything is in a state of flux. Things are changing. But the unfortunate thing is that many of us do not move with the time. And this is the challenge that we have all faced. Now, when you go elsewhere, where they've done a proper environmental scanning and they have looked at these issues and the way, for example, Gen Zs want to learn things, they have been able to incorporate some of all these things into the way these people learn and acquire knowledge. Take, for example, I remember in 2015, there was a policy in the UAE which actually emphasized that, for example, if you are a civil servant you are expected to acquire a new skill through the MOOC platform, mass open online campuses. And you have several of them, many of them, with thousands and thousands of free learning, except that you want a certification, then of course you pay like $100 to download your certificate. Otherwise, you can just go to Udemy, you go to Coursera, and several other platforms where you can actually learn. But the problem is, here, internet is here. We have smartphone in our hands, and all the things we learn. Do people even take advantage of all these things? You see, I said to people, there's no kind of knowledge you want to acquire today that you cannot find on the internet. You cannot find on the internet. It's there. When I was studying theology, for example, in my theological school, I had to follow master's university curriculum online. I took all their courses online, benchmarking against what I was learning in our own institution here. And it was a whole world of difference for me. But the exposure was massive. That even the courses that people were afraid to handle, I became almost an expert because of following these courses online. You know, I was talking with somebody yesterday and he said, oh, wow, you know, when I teach two opposing courses, I teach philosophy of religion and I teach dogmatic theology, and two of them are opposing. And I say, why should they be opposing? They're not opposing. Because philosophy is a way of thinking of a people or a group. There is Christian philosophy. The presuppositions are based on scripture. They are not opposite. They are the same. But you see, the way it's taught here is that you're taking Greek philosophy in place of your Christian philosophy. So this is a problem, and this is a mix-up in the educational space that you find. But when you benchmark yourself against, you can be in Nigeria and follow the curriculum of Oxford or Hague, MIT, or other first-class ivory towers all across the globe, because you can actually access their courses online. There are libraries online that you don't even have any need for issues. So now, like you said, the market for the local entrepreneurs whose job is to do training for people will really die. But that will not suffocate the industry or people acquiring skill, because there are new platforms and new avenue to learn this thing. I wanted to learn how to do akara, so I just downloaded some YouTube on how to fry akara. So now I can make it free. So I didn't need to go to stay with somebody to learn it. I learn it on the YouTube. So it's as simple as that. So people can acquire skill from different platforms. But I think that's one area where we need to educate our children, for example. That yes, you can be doing a major course, but there are other courses you can take online and acquire skills that could be very useful and relevant to you in the course of your life.
Let me do a follow-up to that question. You know, apprenticeship is fading. If on a large scale, there's what we call apathy.
I think it's the model that is changing.
Large-scale apathy. If you look at the crop of young people now, they are not taking interest in that. They rather prefer go to businesses that will fetch them money daily. You know, go to Okada businesses, Yahoo, and things like that. So what kind of challenge does that poses to apprenticeship in Nigeria, and then the need for the survival of this entity in Nigeria?
Yeah, that is what I have said. When you have a system that rewards indolence, that rewards mediocrity, that rewards criminality, it will be difficult for people in that climb to be inclined to hard work. This is a challenge that we face. And that's why my emphasis, really, I say it everywhere. People keep saying, oh, we have leadership problems. I said, no, it's not leadership problems. It's first and foremost, we discovering ourselves. And then, of course, like Professor Jim Collins says in his book, Good to Great, we must get to that point of facing the brutal facts about our reality. Now, if we don't tell ourselves some very bitter truths, it will be difficult moving forward. See, it's when we face that brutal fact that we can actually now say, oh, this is a weakness, and this is what we should do to addressing this kind of weakness where we find ourselves. You can imagine, growing up as a child, if somebody is known to have criminal intentions, they are completely ostracized from society. If you go to school and you come back with a pen which was different from the one that your parent bought for you, you are exposed. They take you back to the school and you have to explain where you got the point from. We are having a society today that where children who are in school and they tell their parents that they have bought a car, and people don't see anything bad about it. And they don't ask what kind of job are they doing. And they are just happy that their children has bought a car as student. This is a sad story where we know no thieves, criminals, people who are diabolic, get into money ritual and the rest of them, getting chieftaincy titles from traditional river rulers. People who are drug barons, given front seats in the churches and in the mosque. This kind of a society will not encourage hard work. A society where people who work hard are not remunerated, but people who are of low virtue get rewarded. Hi. Now, there was a conversation in the public space the other day on how people who come to expose their nakedness on open televisions are rewarded with millions of naira, and those who excel in academics are not even recognized at all. That is our environment. And that cannot engender hard work and productivity. All I just need to do, and I go and panabit my face, open my chest as a woman, wear miniskirt, and then I win 10 million because I'm an open TV show. So why do I need to go and read or to go and learn work if this easy virtue can give me all I need in life? All of us, people go to school to earn a living, and you are in school and you cannot even earn what these people are earning. People are smoking Morocco all and down, and they are empowered by same society. And those who are diligent are not empowered. This is a problem. This is a trajectory. Now, if you go to the UAE, for example, if you pass a reading competition in the UAE, you win $1 million. And that is at secondary school level. What the system designed that for? To encourage children to read. Annually, every year, there's a national reading competition in the UAE. Books are put on the ground, children are called to come and read them, and the person who finishes and understands what's in those books, the UAE government reward them with $1 million. And you know how much that is? That will encourage people to want to learn. Now, when you look at the spirit that was behind the Industrial Revolution in Europe, which came with the Reformation, was the preaching of men like John Calvin, Zwingli, in the whole of Europe, emphasizing what they call the theology of work. That work was important. And if we must make it to heaven, then we must work. Because God is working, those who are made in his image are workers. And if you are not working and you are eating, you are a thief. That was their teaching. And it became a huge challenge in Europe. And of course, Max Weber did a whole lot of study, what he called the Protestant ethics. And there was this thinking, and look, Europe wasn't like as we are today. There were no jobs. People were looking for employment. And then, of course, they came back to John Calvin and asked him, John Calvin, you said that if we don't work, we cannot get to heaven. But there is no work to be done. And John Calvin told them there was job everywhere. And for people to be able to earn a meal in a day, they will need to go to public places. People were sweeping the road. People were cleaning the gutter just to earn a meal for a day. And as they were doing this, a whole new industry came. Policing came, traffic control came, Red Cross came, all manner of volunteerism came. And a whole new industries were created and people were accommodated into it. Just because somebody came out and said, the scripture says, if you cannot work, you must not eat. And if you are working, if you are not working and you are eating, you are going to hell. And the people didn't want to go to hell. And so they needed to be able to earn every food they eat in a day. So they got themselves into volunteers and they were working. And then, of course, Calvin knew that as people who were doing this volunteering, cleaning the road and all these things, that of course there's going to be a lot of discouragement. What he was now preaching was that all work is work. No one should be valued more than the other. That we must have equal recognition for work. So the cleaner and the manager, they are all both working. And so one must not be treated as inferior because all are contributing. And that was sustained. And what that makes is that people are able now to work. Now, what do we have in our environment? This segregation about work, and you have somebody who is, everybody want to wear suit because that's the only way we feel work is. So we don't want to get our hands soiled, we don't want to get our hands dirty. So we are leaving the menial jobs for foreigners, and then we are looking for white-collar jobs that are not available, and then we say there is no job in the environment. This is the tragedy we all face. And this is where we need to change our mind and our orientation and see how we can adopt this new thinking and align ourselves with what is happening globally. My friend's son, 14-year-old, learned a whole lot of coding in Paris during the 1 year of COVID-19, staying at home. They gave them laptop and they were allowed to learn new things. And today he's doing gig job while still in school, just a 16-year-old. And he's earning money from across the globe. So this is what we need to do. We must have to embrace new technology, embrace new way of thinking, embrace new way of doing things. And then, of course, all the problems we think that are around us, we just see that they really do not exist there.
So looking at global practices now, what is the trend of skills development? What area are skills developments going towards that people, individuals, and even businesses need to be looking at? What are those demands from businesses in terms of skills that people should be looking towards upskilling at?
You know, I was having a conversation with a friend recently. He was looking for a job, and then I was in the UAE, and he said all the time he went for interview, nobody asked him, what course did you study and what certificate do you have? All that employers want to know is, what can you do? It's simple. I don't want to know whether you read computer engineering or computer science. I need somebody who should be able to fix my laptop when it spoils, or our computer system in the office. That's what I need. Whether you have a PhD in computer science is not my problem. And I think that's a trend globally today. People are actually not looking for certificate. People are looking for competencies. People who have capacity to do work and say, okay, this is a job available. Tell me that you can do it. And then demonstrate that you can do it. Whether you have a degree or don't have a degree, it doesn't matter. It's only in Nigeria here we glorify certificates, which are almost useless. So I think we should be able to look beyond certificates and certifications to look at what people can do. And if people can do work and they are rewarded appropriately, then this rat race to make money quick will reduce a great deal. Now you take, for example, if you're a plumber, for example, in the US or in the UK, you can earn more than a professor. So if I know that I'm doing plumbing work and I earn so much, what professor can, so why will I get to really bother myself thinking of going to have PhD? That's why you actually find that if you go to US today, really, you see, in terms of the academic community, the proper people who are from the United States don't have it. And that's why Nigerians are the most enlightened community in the US. What they need the school really for? The school is just to be able to feed you, really. Now, if the system is looking for people who can work, so they focus on work and not the academics. Although some people are turning to drug as it were now. But what is important here is the fact that people are actually looking for skills to do a particular job. And that's what industries are looking for. They are not really looking for certificate. Oh, I have a degree in mass communication, and then you cannot communicate. So what is the use of that degree to me? And if I have somebody who read history and is able to communicate well, so I will prefer the history graduate to the one who read mass comm. So this is where, like we said, that synergy must have to exist between the town and the gown.
All right. One of the challenges confronting skills development in Nigeria is the issue of funding. And what you see now is the politicians, they've taken advantage of this vacuum, you know, to score political gains. They come into this space to empower youth and women when it comes to political equation. Now, how do we solve this problem of funding or make it like a form of national policy where it becomes a norm for Nigeria to empower or, you know, what I call sponsor skills as acquisition for its citizens, so that politicians will not take advantage of this vacuum as a political tool?
Well, I also feel that what we need to do is a review of our national, some of our laws that actually inhibit some of these things happening. Now, when you go to other climes where you see people have value and interest, funding is always not a problem. That's why you see individuals that are very wealthy, that the community or society has been fair to, and they have benefited a whole lot from the system. They institute chairs in various universities. You have Ford chairs. All they're trying to do is to train up a professor, for example, in a particular discipline who will mentor young people to grow competencies and expertise in a particular discipline. And that professor is not paid by state money. It's paid either by a family or a company who has interest in that line of business or industry. That happens everywhere. And I think we can also really replicate that in our environment. Where, for example, people who are producing, take for example cement or woodwork or anything, will deliberately put fund in the university, for example, to train people in line with what their industry require. But you see, the problem here is that somehow there are some certain things you cannot do here until, I don't know if that law has changed now. I was talking with somebody, I think it was somewhere in Ikorodu, and I said, look at the road that gets into your factory. Why can't you fix this road? Or he said there's a law that said, oh, we can't fix the road. If we must fix it, we have to pass the money through the politician. Because the law says an individual cannot build a road for the nation. That's a retrogressive law. Now, if you give the money to the politician award the job to somebody who will not even be ready to do the job, and you have passed your money and then you don't see any job done. Why would the law forbid factories, for example, to build roads? So some of those laws we need to change. And if those laws are changed, then funding can become easy. I bring money, and I also want to see that the money that I'm putting in this system is working for me. Not for me to put money in a system, and then I said, okay, I have a chair in a university for this professor to do a certain research that will benefit society. And then, of course, I don't have control over how that money is spent, and as the vice chancellor will determine whether the professor get the money to do the research or not. Now, once you have those kind of barriers, it will be difficult for private investors to get into the system and want to fund some of all these things. And I think this is area where, again, we need to speak to the issue of responsibility and accountability within our system. You know, you give money to some people to do some work, and they are not accountable. You can't call them to account to say, okay, you received this X amount of money in the last 1 year. Please come and tell us how you spend the money. Like TED Fund, for example. Companies are paying 1% or 2% of their profit to fund research and infrastructure development in the university. Now, how do companies actually interface on how this money is spent? The money is given to government, and then those in TED Fund and those in the admin in the university determine how they are going to spend the money, and they use it to build structures, some of them that are not even needed within school. You can imagine a situation where TED Fund is building, what they call it now, auditorium, where people are doing entertainment, and students don't have classroom where to learn. So these are the issues that really will affect the funding, because nobody is actually saying government has to do the funding alone. Private businesses also want to fund, but people want to see that the system that you're funding is actually accountable, that you are putting money down and you are seeing what the money is doing for you.